Well, I've always been interested in sustainability and was working sustainability research for quite a few years, and particularly doing a lot of evaluation. So I'd studied program evaluation, how to tell if initiatives are having the impact that you want them to have. And I'd been working on a whole range of really interesting projects around consumption and circular economy, and got some really disappointing results from a number of evaluations where people had put a lot of effort and time and passion into these projects but not really got the change at the end that they wanted to see. And so I realised that the most useful thing I could do would actually be to understand how to design these programs better, what actually works to change behaviour, so that I could work with these stakeholders to use behavioural science and evidence to how they design the approach so that it would then translate into the impact that they wanted to have. So a lot of the work was working with local government or state government who are responsible for our waste policy, who wanted to change the way that people might treat their waste, sort their waste, dispose of it, but also how they buy and use food, household goods, how businesses use commercial goods to really change how many resources we're using and what we're doing with it when we no longer want it. So I started out quite informally, actually just looking up, to see what other people were doing, where had things worked, what had they tried. And I came across, this area called behavioural economics. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Tells a really good story. But the more I got into it, the more I realised that there's so much more. Behavioural science is this much broader kind of sphere. It draws on other disciplines like sociology, which I'd actually done way back in my undergrad. It brings things like human geography and anthropology and psychology and economics together, and it really brings a lot of tools together to look at these problems systematically and then come up with this evidence about what is actually working. How can we know what we should try? And my journey to BehaviourWorks specifically was really interesting. I was actually being interviewed by a colleague who was doing some BehaviourWorks research on waste and was coming to talk to me about some of this sustainability research that I'd done, and then happened to mention that there was a job going to continue doing some of this research. And I thought, that's where I want to be. I want to be working with people who are thinking about what I'm thinking about, who are wrestling with these problems of what does work, how can we help people design programs. So I made the switch over to BehaviourWorks, got to work with a whole bunch of other people who knew a bit more about this, and slowly, have absorbed all of that knowledge to be here now. I think the challenge that I'm most interested that's facing behavioural science at the moment is this idea of how we tackle really complex problems. So there's a lot of really great behavioural science work that narrows down problems into very specific, tangible challenges that we might be able to do something with, and would often show really great change in these really narrow contexts. But it can take a really long time for these really specific changes to add up to a sea change. And so I'm really interested in how behavioural science actually takes a broader perspective, a more systems approach, keeps all of the complexity in view while we apply our tools to that, so that we actually have a chance of creating these broader shifts, these bigger transformations, as well as making small incremental improvements. So my research area, circular economy, is really about how we use the resources that we take out of the earth, in our day-to-day lives, in our business, in our industry. And what's really interesting to me about that is there's a real environmental impact, that we need to be really conscious of. We're pulling resources out of the ground that damages the earth that we're living on for us and future generations. And we often are throwing that stuff away, which then has more environmental impact. But there's a bigger part to it too, because the way that we interact with stuff, the items in our life, also has an effect on our relationships with each other, our feelings about ourselves. And so this idea of, can we change how we relate to goods and materials, and the stuff around us, can not only help the environment, but I think it can also change the way that we live.